And I'm the CEO for Franchise India. Today's discussion will revolve around, of course, post-COVID, and we'll get some new learnings from Mr. Kacker as well. So let me start by laying out a few ground rules for the attendees. The discussion will go on for about an hour's time. And if you have any questions, you can put it in Q&A option. You can mention for any specific panelist if you've got any question for them. You can even participate in the polls during the webinar. We would also request you to keep your questions, please, concerned with the scope of the discussion. And now, just about this new series that we have started, which is the Franchise CXO Dialogue. So, with this bright thought, on this bright day, we are starting with this new series, which will host the CXOs and the thought leaders of leading franchise companies, from the franchise organizations, to speak about the new industry practices. We'll talk about changing work ethics, emerging trends. And of course, in this special post-lockdown edition, I'm very delighted to have a very special CXO guest with us, Dr. Anuj Kacker, the President and Executive Director of Aptech Ltd. He's there with us today, and as you all know, the Aptech Ltd started way back in 1986, and it's about 34 years that they have seen many ups and downs. The downturn in 2001, 2009, and many more challenging times, and still continue to be very resilient. Dr. Kacker has a collective years of experience, and has been prominent in making the company where it is today. And he's been able to safeguard companies' interest in franchisees and students. And so now we will talk about the current situations. We also have Mr. Gaurav Maurya, the President of Franchise India, with us today. So, Dr. Kacker, I would, start with posing, a question to you, and setting the context right onto this CXO dialogue as to how do you see, after this, we've been into this pandemic for over about, 50 to 60 days now. So how do you see parents and students' expectations changing from educational institutions?
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Ashita, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And good morning to all the people who are listening to us. I think when the pandemic started, as far as the parents and students were concerned, I think it caught them by surprise in a sense. Obviously, it caught everybody by a surprise, so to speak. But if I were to lay this from the context of Aptech, we kind of anticipated this, right? I remember the date, it was March 5th, when we held the first meeting, that should and that time in India, there were very few cases, less than 5 or 6 in Kerala. And we said that should a situation like this arise, where we are forced, the students are going to be forced or locked up in the homes, and we have to continue their education, let's try and reimagine how it's going to happen. What are the challenges? What are the kind of things we would like to do at that stage? Between March 5th and March 15th, we had a solution ready. And as it so happened, unlike the rest of the industries which got officially locked down around 20th of March, education institutions were ordered shut right between 13th to 15th of March. So 15th of March, when all the education institutes were ordered to be closed, 16th onwards, we started our online education, and the students, as it were, did not miss a class. So from the physical world, they moved to the online world seamlessly. So that kind of set the expectations right and at a high level. If you go into, the other option would have been, which happened in many big institutes and big universities as well, where there was a break of week or 10 days, and they kind of grouped together and figured out what to do. So that set the expectations low. So we started with high expectations for our students. And even today, we reached a level of around 70% of our students who are doing online education seamlessly. But we had to go beyond that. We are in a skill enabled or a job enabled enablement industry. And when you look at that kind of industry, it's not enough to have simply a seamless talk between a teacher and a student, or between a faculty and a student, that you put both of them face to face on an online system and your job is done. No, because they have certain learning objectives. So the bigger issue, rather than enablement of technology, was really how do we keep the same learning objectives alive in the online world. And so we did various kinds of mechanisms to do that, so that the experience that the student gets in a physical world from a learning objective point of view is not compromised. So that was good, the good start. So immediately when that happens and the learning continuity was maintained, we started addressing ourselves to the next big challenge, which was that we realized there will be some fatigue as weeks wore on. And both fatigue at the student end, there will be fatigue at the faculty end, as to when you're teaching day in day out with all the problems that were associated with the lockdown working. So we devised various mechanisms of making students engaged, keeping students engaged. And here I'm not saying engaged as in only fun or in terms of events. From a learning perspective, which industry seminar has to happen when, which gamification has to happen when, what would the student need to do in such a situation. And most importantly, if my student has to be recruited by a company in this period, what would they look for? So we quickly worked out that plan. And very soon after that, we went into the third phase, which was, organizing interviews and placements right during the lockdown. So you'll be surprised that, the kind of hundreds of interviews and placements which have happened with the student is sitting at home, the recruiter is sitting at home in the respective place, interviews are happening, placements are happening, online appointment letters are being issued, joining is happening online. So in a sense, it was business as usual to the extent possible. I think we reached about a 70% efficiency level. And then we started kind of chipping away at the balance 30 and seeing what are individual problems which are coming in the way. And our target is to reach at least 80% before our lockdown is over in the entire country.
Okay. Very interesting. And you rightly said, we've seen the responsible organizations like Aptech. I mean, Aptech is an institute. Every given person and generations have passed through the performance, and you yourself have been instrumental in building this phenomenal organization. And I feel that you're absolutely right. A lot of companies were not able to match continuity, and they were not able to keep the flow going, and they had this whole so to say hold on period, which is not great. And second thing, which I think, and I would like your view on that with all this happened, are you working on some kind of business intelligence in terms of change of products, or what is going to now happen, or how education would be perceived going forward, or how we can even now with technologies help make it even more inclusive, because you're already available in almost all small parts of India, but can this go even further now?
Oh, of course it can, and you've touched on a very important part. EdTech or technology enabled delivery has got a lot of media attention, and a lot of attention has been gravitated towards this during the lockdown period. But we have to remember, EdTech is not new. It's been around for 10 years. It was not born out of a COVID situation. I mean, you have had MOOCs since 2002, where the best of universities and the best of professors and where those universities have been teaching lakhs of people across the world. And different companies have approached the EdTech business from their own vantage points, whether it's technology, whether it's education, whether various things. So my first point is that it's not new. Okay. It has got attention, more exaggerated attention at this point of time. My second point is that it's more important to concentrate on the ed part of edtech rather than the tech part of edtech. You know, unless you are delivering through any technology medium, the value proposition which they're supposed to deliver, it will not succeed in the long run. I think somewhere along the line, we get enamored or we get carried away by the technology elements, which are fine, which are needed, and they've become beautifully available, and they're improving day in, day out. But especially when you're looking at how do I make a person job ready? How do I make a person skilled for the world of tomorrow? It's not simply enough to look at what is my best technological solution. Do I do a recorded video or should I do a live video? You can do either. But it's more important is what is going to be the learning outcome at the end of the day. Is that going to be achieved or is not going to be achieved? And if companies focus on that part of it, and why talk about education itself? You can talk about any other industry which is using technology, whether it's the financial world or the real estate world or any other world for that matter. Unless let's talk about the financial world, unless the investor gets a benefit out of doing something technologically remote, you're not going to do it. So certain things work well, certain things don't work as well. And it's important to differentiate between the two. That's the second point. The third point which you raised is that, yes, there are different segments of the industry which have moved faster, and we've actually grown very rapidly during this time. And maybe sometime during the course of this discussion, we can touch on what those are as well. So the idea is to segregate out those elements which this enables and use it to your advantage, and keeping your focus at the end of the day on your consumer, the customer, or the student, as the case may be. Moment your eyes are out of that value proposition and your eyes get fixated on the tech part of it, you'll go wrong.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And education and skill up would make a very big important impact now in the industries. And everybody is talking about one of the important areas which everybody has to focus to for the next industry change is that how we skill up people. And so I agree with you, education and deeper foundations, creating capabilities in people would play a much more important role. Technology is just a platform to deliver that. And I think very well said. And that's how I always mention that the people talk about this IT boom in India, but they don't talk about these two institutions, which is one is Aptech and one is NIIT, which actually created that boom, because it was your foundation in late 80s, which created this breed of a lot of people who understood how to work on systems and so on and so forth. Hence the Infosys, hence the Wipros, and hence the people were able to hire a lot of talent. So, so a lot of that actually should be given to training companies, because they bring in a lot of industry capabilities, and then hence the industry performs. So it's a very foundational role which organizations like yours could have. Over to you, Ashta. Next question.
Yeah. So, it's a very interesting point. But, while listening to you, I could get that in my mind that, how do you work this on, over a period of time? About, last 2 decades, I've learned that, there's this franchise relationship, which is there in between a principal company and a business owner. So there's much of an understanding also, because it is from so-called an owner mindset to an owner and or an MD to an MD, it's got a similar mindset. So how do you, because, sometimes it can go very well. Sometimes they're not able to understand the pain, but most likely because they also run an organization and you're an enterprise, the margin could vary, or the intensity, of things could vary, but they would understand. So how do you look into that? Since it's such an old organization, we've got about over 800 partners nationwide, and some of them worldwide. Yes, you were saying something.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. I think if you're looking at franchising as a channel to reach the consumer, I think you have to understand firstly that it is not a fiduciary relationship. It is not a feudal system one runs. It is a peer-to-peer association where each participant is bringing something to the table. Okay. And it is important that all the participants involved in the fulfillment of the customer's expectation understand their role. I mean, franchisee is just one part of it. It just happens to be another organization, but equally it will apply to various departments and various stakeholders within the franchisor's organization or the franchisee's organization. So how seamlessly you're able to integrate really determines this. To make it seamless, I think what has to be understood, firstly, the expectations have to be set correctly. If either of the parties is coming from wrong expectations, frictions will arise. And the ultimate sufferer will be the consumer, not either franchisor or the franchisee. And once the consumer suffers, both the parties suffer. Let's first talk about the franchisee. Okay, as we see it, I think most people would tend to look at franchisee as somebody who will bring investment into the system. That's the easy part. You can go to a bank and get investment. I don't need a franchisee to get investments. And a lot of people come to me and say, how much money do I have to put in? I said, okay, you ballpark, this is the figure. But this is not what I'm approaching you for. And that is not the reason you should come to us. Let's see, core value proposition according to me for a franchise is entrepreneurship, which is the key value addition which the franchisee brings to the table, which if I were to put up a own center in that location would be absent there, no matter how hard I tried. So for me, the entrepreneurship element which a franchisee brings and how good an entrepreneur he is key. And that's what I keep telling my team as well, that when you're evaluating a franchisee, prospective franchisee, look for those traits which make him a good entrepreneur. It's not money is only one part of it. This business is more about the ROI in this business is not to be defined as return on investment. It is to be defined as return on involvement. That's another aspect which we look at. Is the franchisee able, given all his other preoccupations and businesses, will this person be able to involve himself personally in this business? If he is able to involve himself in his business, the chances of success become much higher. Third, of course, is the key element of local knowledge or geographical familiarity or language skills or cultural familiarity. That, of course, is the third element which the franchisee does bring to the table. And then only an investment issue comes into the picture. So if you get this sequencing right in your evaluation, it'll work to your favor. Likewise, when a franchisee is evaluating a franchisor, the key things which I would suggest that a franchisee should look for, whether it's Aptech or anybody else for that matter, any industry, is this company has a demonstrated model, or is still in the process of evolving a model? Now, both kinds of franchisors exist. There are people who would come in, maybe have 1 year into the business and they start franchising. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that shouldn't be done. But the issue here for the franchisee to evaluate is the model robust enough and is it sustainable enough? Because that is what you're buying into. Because if the model undergoes its ups and downs, you would get impacted in some way. Or if the model needs to be changed ab initio, if it's very young model, then what are the changes which will need to be done? So you need to evaluate that. Second thing, I think it's a cultural fit has to be important. There's much less importance is paid to this, is that there has to be a cultural fit between the franchisee and the franchisor. What is the DNA of the organization? For example, at Aptech, I can say we have among all this vast network of centers that we have just 3 owned centers. Those are also legacy centers. So because our DNA of our organization is building on relationships. And that is a key element which a prospective franchisee should look for in a franchisor. Third element I will suggest is their past behaviors in various situations. Talk to other franchisors. how have they sustained themselves? Of course, any business will go through its ups and downs. How have they reacted in those situations? That has to be a criteria for you. Most people start the conversation that what is the percentage you take. I mean, that's absolutely wrong place to start, because if it's a financing business, then there are much better mechanisms to finance, either give finance or take finance. And this is not necessarily the best way to do that. This is a business where two organizations come together for a common objective. But you have to also understand at the same time what are the limitations of a franchise business. It comes with a lot of limitations as well. If your entrepreneurship instinct as a franchisee dictates that I can be the best in this field, and I have knowledge, I have the expertise, and I have the wherewithal to build my own little cocoon in which I will excel, I think franchising is not for you. Franchising does involve trade-offs between doing the best possible and what is acceptable. You know, I very often take a contra view in meetings when we say we should be doing this in a given franchise location because that franchisee is very good and he can do it. I sometimes, you know, put a contra view. I say, I don't think we should do it because there are just 5 franchisees across the country who can do this. So the idea is to find the golden average, golden meal. And the idea is to go on improving that bar across. Now the guy, those 5 guys who could do that good things feel cheated. That here I could have done this and this company is not able to understand that and is stopping me from doing this fantastic thing which I can do in my area. But that is the limitation, or that is the compromise you are bringing in, you're forced to bring in because you're getting the benefit of the larger ecosystem that you become part of it. So while you get certain benefits, you also sacrifice. So the idea is not to become individually the best. The idea is to become collectively the best. And that if those expectations are understood clearly by all parties, I think it makes for a sustainable relationship in the long run. You know, really speaking, I don't mind saying this in a public forum as well, that the only asset which companies like Aptech have is the relationships that we have across all these 800 centers. Today, for a person to come in, let's say, you know, a big education university from somewhere comes in and says it wants to set up a franchising system in India. First, it has to find 800 people. It has to develop 800 relationships. It has to get to the right 800 relationships. It has to make the 200 wrong relationships which came and went along the way. So those are huge entry barriers and people realize that. And that is why the power of a franchising business also rests on the fact that the entry barriers become very high for competition to break so easily. And these are the golden principles on which we have tried to build this organization since '86, as Gaurav mentioned.
No, absolutely, sir. I think it's a huge learning. I think a lot of audience which would take a great takeaway for what you said. And I want to summarize this, particularly on past performance and the credibility of our organization comes from difficult times. And I remember as early start, we started in '99, and the first set of our clients, and Ashita would know, were all IT companies. Our magazine used to look like an IT education magazine, you know,
Yes.
and we used to have these almost about 75 odd companies, and some of them were very aggressive at that time. And I don't want to mention one company which went up and opened up 100 centers in record time, and they used to give people free computers and claim a lot of jobs, 100% jobs. And then you had a dot-com bust. And out of that 75, I can tell you, I think 5 were left. And the rest 70 were packed in just about 4 to 5 months. And even franchising, they lost a lot of money because they owed us the marketing money or advertising money and things like that. And all 5 which were left never made wrong promises. They never overcommitted their franchisees that will give you minimum guarantees. They never did anything which was out of the box. They found it very difficult at those times when these other companies were growing, because they were coming with all sort of goodies for franchisees. And these 5 companies stick to what they honestly believed in. And I can tell you that out of that also, a lot of consolidation happened, and we have only 2 great organizations out there in the market, which are both respectable in their own right. And I like that point. It's very, very important. And we've ourselves seen that how Aptech, in the most difficult times, stood by their franchisees and handled that cause, and stood by the honest opinion. Sometimes you cannot make everybody happy. And you're right. One thing I learned from a company called Subway, so they make the most, I would say, average sandwich in the world. And they don't make the greatest sandwich. You can actually make a better sandwich at home than actually going out and having a Subway. And they never experiment in any market. They don't try to make other things out of that. They keep the model simple so that everybody can, so to say, I'm using the word idiot proof, and it still makes money for people. And it still delivers good hygienic quality food out there for people. So sometimes franchise companies look very simple and they don't experiment too lot. I appreciate that you're so honest and telling openly, because it's also about averaging the capability of the entire network and keeping the entire network grow and so on and so forth. So very, very good points from you.
I just want to add one point to what you mentioned. It is, since you mentioned the difficult times of 2000, 2001, 2 points really emerged from there. It is not only that the franchisors stood by the franchisee. I think the franchisees also stood by the franchisor. I think that is underemphasized sometimes. Today, a large portion of our franchisees have been with us for 20 years, 15 years, 30 years, ever since Aptech started. So we have people whose second generation, the father started it and the son is doing it. We have so many franchisees which have multiple ownerships. They've, taken more centers as time went along. So these are all indicators of a symbiotic relationship. It is not that we have made wrong choices in franchisees also. In this whole long journey, I'm sure we have. Normally what we try to do is to take this mechanism up of, as I said, the idea is to take that average bar, but not keep it average. You have to go on improving it, right? We do a 10 minus 5 principle. We add 10%, we subtract 5%. That 5%, there will always be some people who are not able to meet it, or where there's a conflict of alignment of goals, and there are wrong choices we have made, or the franchisee has made a wrong choice. It's a healthy parting. It should happen. So we do a 10 minus 5 principle in terms of how do we expand our network. Also, in a franchising network, I believe it's always determined by the weakest franchisee and not by the strongest franchisee. Even, of course, the idea is to keep it in a bandwidth. It's too much to hope for that it will be exactly the same, while we would like it to be exactly the same. But the bandwidth has to be very narrow. And the weakest franchisee has to go on going up the chain. And that makes for a very, very robust and very sustainable solution. It is also predicated on innovation. While you talked about keeping the model simple, but it is not to be equated with not evolving. What we do as a company today and where the maximum of our revenue comes from is very, very different than what it came of the period that you mentioned, while the franchisees remain the same. So the idea was to go on adding or go on concentrating on those segments which had greater potential, had greater value for the student, had greater value for the industry, and take it step by step. Just to give you an example, I think while multimedia we started in 1990s, the real focus to multimedia came post this bust that you were talking about of 2000, 2001. So in the early 2000s, we started focusing on animation as a area. It was very young or nascent industry at that point of time. And So we came from what used to be Arena Multimedia. We actually changed the name to Arena Animation. Although less than 5% of our revenue of those centers actually came from an Arena Animation, or from the animation segment at that stage. But that's how you make the change. Sure. And today animation has become very huge for us. You go on to, then visual effects came into the picture. So it became multimedia, animation, and visual effects. So a lot of centers today, it's a 50-50 or split between visual effects training and other trainings. While all these may not have anything to do with each other. Then came broadcast, now gaming, digital media. So the product mix will go on changing, while the edifice on which the products are changing remains the same. And it is the franchisor's responsibility clearly to strategize on those areas and build it forward, anticipating those changes, looking at what are the business cycles which are likely to happen, build your industry associations, take all those things so that what you are delivering is for the future, which may be visible to 10% of the franchisees, but certainly not be visible to 90% of the franchisees, at least not in the same way. So that's really a franchisor's responsibility to be able to discharge properly.
So very interesting. I think we'd like to know more about how you put a systematic product development or a new product introduction in the system, because with 800 odd franchisees, it's not that easy. And this probably can be a great learning for a lot of smaller organizations, because I've seen in franchising, especially for young companies, they start very well and they get to a size, and then the management of that network becomes a challenge for them. They're not able to build any change in the systems. They're not able to bring better processes, because they start to getting into a difficulty of management. I feel that the expansion always comes easy to people because they sometimes bring new ideas and new concepts. So it's easy to find partners, early stage partners. But when you are a large network like 800 franchisees, bringing in change and also helping franchisees buy into that change, because sometimes the franchisee is not even interested post when they have come in. They're happy to put the initial capex, but if you go and tell them that, look, improve your interiors, do a little bit branding change, or change maybe a fresh investment in your capex in your systems or any things, with added revenue coming clearly to them, they're still not interested. They want the franchisor to say, why don't you invest into that if you want to bring this change? So what is your say on that? How do you manage that change cycle?
Yeah, I think firstly, first part of it was on the newer franchisers, people who are getting into the franchising mode. I would say be sure of the robustness of the value proposition. Because if you make a wrong channel choice, where your value proposition has not been validated, you will go wrong, you will lose money. Because at the end of the day, you're making a choice of a channel to scale up. Don't scale up just because you don't have the money to scale up. As I said, this is not a financing business. If you think if you're not sure about your robust model, you use other financing options. Don't use franchisors financing. You're only going to complicate things for yourself. As Gaurav, you mentioned, you have to transfer your convictions to 800 people or even first 10 people. And those 10 people have to be able to come to your value proposition, also not deviate from it, not come up with a better one or a different one. Because then otherwise you have 10 different companies. That's not franchising, right? So you should be sure of this. Of course, it's a very viable, very good scaling up methodology, and certainly Gaurav he's where he is because he spotted this very early and made Franchise India Holding where it is today. On this, so I'm carrying coals to Newcastle, but I'm really talking to the wide world out there. That the issue is sustainability. The issue is not just a short-term outlooks. That's what I would like to say to the young people or the newer people who are wanting to come in.
Sure. Ashita, over to you.
Yeah. So very interesting conversation. I've got my good takeaways on it, and especially the return on involvement here. I love that quote. On this, quickly, I would want to touch upon, one thing that companies, over a period of time, they've got three tiers with them. So they've got themselves, they've got their franchisees, and they've got their consumers. And change is evident. So changes, revolves around the companies, as you've rightly said, that there are certain changes that you've done in the products. But I personally feel there are changes which comes from three P's. It comes in products, it has to come in processes, and it has to come in priority, which is largely a consumer-centric change. But in your case, that would be students, because they are the consumers overall. So I understand that you've already touched upon the changes in the products. Just wanted to understand, from your standpoint in terms of processes, as to how the productivity and the efficiency is coming on. Like nowadays, we have got people working from home. So how do you look into that?
Yeah, before I answer that, I think there are two types of changes, and we should distinguish between those two types of changes which are happening. One are incremental changes, which happen because you have one idea, you implement it, which are product changes or even process changes. You can always find mechanisms to do something better than what you were doing earlier. Then there are, seminal changes or more major changes which happen. And I think companies really need to be adaptable to those bigger changes, which are far more important. I'll just take you back. Gaurav will remember, Ashita may not remember those days, but we used to have black and white televisions. In the era of black and white televisions, which were the leaders? Your Uptrons, ECL, Salora, those were the kind of people who dominated the industry at that time. Then early 80s, what happened? There's one single change that happened, that it became color. No other change, right? You're still watching by and large the same program, but now you're watching in color. What happened to all those brands? None of them exist. Then you had new brands. You had BPLs, Onedas, Videocons, these people who dominated the television industry. What changed? Nothing changed, right? Look at the next level of change. Then flat screen televisions came. Now you're watching the same thing in color. You're watching the same thing in, watching the same programs, but watching it through a different form factor, which is a flat screen television. And suddenly you have new people. You have Sonys, you have LGs, you have Samsungs. Why did the BPLs, Onedas, Videocons of the world not be here? What was so different about this? Did they not have a strong dealer network? They have one of the best dealer networks going. And I'm sure collectively those dealer networks had enough knowledge about the industry, and not that they did not know about these changes which are happening. Videocon by itself was one of the largest picture tube manufacturer in the country. So despite these changes happen, when major changes happen, it gives the opportunity for new players to come into the fray and establish leadership. Even if you look at television, you go to washing machines. I mean, I'll talk about it. We used to have those semi-automatic washing machines. It just into automatic washing machine, just one function extra. Suddenly it was not Videocon, it was Whirlpools and IFBs and LGs and Samsungs. So technology can influence, a change in technology can influence changes in leadership. So you can never take your leadership position for granted. That is that's the message I keep telling my franchisees. In our whole so-called aura of being the leaders, we can't forget these facts. And because we have not forgotten these facts in this 30 years, we have been able to withstand these cycles repeatedly by adapting ourselves to new changes. I talked about EdTech. The use of technology is to be emphasized. Okay, don't decry the use of technology in the field of education. We ourselves have been doing this over the years. Forget COVID for a minute. The pedagogy that we used to teach has undergone major changes on technology grounds. We used to have physical books, then we went into versions of same physical books in PDF formats on the screen. Now we teach particularly the students who are in the animation and visual effects arena and the Mac part of it, using augmented reality. That means the student interacts with the screen on his mobile phone to be able to do that. And there's nothing to do with COVID. So changes or use of technology in delivery is very important and should continue to be innovated upon. And that is how I see the change which COVID was also likely to bring. It is going to be another one of those seminal moments where newer opportunities will come into the tech world. But that is not to say that the core value proposition is getting destroyed or changed in any manner. Just keep focusing on the core value proposition. What is our core value proposition? It is job enablement. Are people, the students, going to be employed? Yes or no? Tick mark. Are the skills that you are delivering relevant to that employment? Yes or no? Tick mark. If any one of those go down this chain, if any one of them is no or a maybe, work on it. And that's the principle which we follow consistently. And it has, and of course, COVID is not a parallel situation to either 2001 or 2009. But certainly, if you talk about from the perspective of change, it is certainly a change driving moment. And we are adapting in many ways to be able to deal with what can be called as a post-COVID world. Now, when you're living through history, it is very difficult to become the historian. You know, history is always written after the fact. But the fact that we are living through what are clearly history, I mean, there's no doubt about anybody's mind that this period will be, there'll be movies made on this period, there will be books written on period, 100 people will get PhDs in this, over this period, analysis, data, everything's going to happen. It'll be dissected ad nauseum for the next 50 or 100 years, if not more. When you are living through it, okay, your ability to see it is your strength, and it's difficult. I mean, let's not also overemphasize this fact, but we are adapting. We are looking at the opportunity areas. There are clear opportunity areas which are coming in. Okay, let's give you one example from my own field. As I mentioned, in Arena and Mac, we teach a lot of people on various kind of creative fields. So we said, within this, certain ones may be impacted. Okay, if the cinema halls are, let's say, go out of fashion for some time, people will start consuming content differently. Does content get affected? Is the first question we need to ask. If content is not affected, you will still need content makers. If you still need content makers, what are the technologies they are going to use to deliver that content? And we look at those aspects. Gaming has got a huge boost during this period, and that is an irreversible process. The kind of viewerships which we have got on OTT platforms is phenomenal. You know, another aspect I want to bring to everybody's notice is that if you just Google and say what's happening in the skilling industry worldwide during this lockdown periods, you will find the Coursera's, the Udemy's, and all these platforms, which are the massively open online courses who deliver EdTech world, have reported double the revenues, at least. So why is this happening? The idea is they're not new. They've been around for 10 years. So what was special about the lockdown period which doubled their revenue? And it will be facetious to assume that it has happened because people had more time. No, sorry, people don't spend money just because they have more time to spare. They can watch movies for free. They can watch a program. They are reskilling themselves. The need for reskilling is being felt by people. Therefore, those people who are in the skilling domain will actually receive a boost. It's not online skilling which is going to receive the boost. It's skilling which is going to, or reskilling which is be needed. If jobs are going to get impacted, which they are, then you have to understand which jobs are going to get impacted. Those people will need to be reskilled into something else. And if your core value proposition is job enablement, you are really at a better place than what you were coming into COVID. Provided you are able to adapt yourself to those changes. And these are the things which consume our mind in these current days as to how do we build a robust thing. What we can know for certain is that there are going to be changes. I think we are very well placed to capitalize on those changes and build on those changes going forward itself. See, one of the other aspects is forget change in our life. Look at the change in the student's life. A student who is today entering my system remains in the system for anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. So it's far beyond the COVID by the time he gets out of my system. So to be able to color his mind with COVID is absolutely wrong.
Absolutely.
That's starting point. But no matter what I teach him today, or the centers teach him, is going to be obsolete in 3 to 5 years' time for his own life. So really the question which we grapple with, or which we emphasize on, is not that what is the technology or what is the skill set you are learning, but what is it you are learning on how to get a job. For example, skills like resilience. What is resilience? Resilience may be a big word, but at the end of the day, it's a simple aspect. How do you bounce back after you are down? I mean, you will face this at some point of life. You will lose jobs with COVID, without COVID, at some point of time, yes? Something will happen. How do you bounce back? Or how do you reskill yourself? Look at areas of teamwork. Look at areas of communication. Look at those elements. So build yourself for the future rather than just building yourself for the current moment. And so a student has 30 to 40 years of work life. It's not going to be spent around learning delivering what he is learning in my center, certainly not. But those values which he is learning today, or those mechanisms that he is learning today, is actually going to enable him throughout. And that is what builds a sustainable organization. Because a person, I mean, today, I'm, by the grace of God, the kind of alumni fraternity which is there in the industry and willing to come and talk to us and share their experiences, share their knowledge with us, to develop the courses with the students, to share their experiences, phenomenal. It's because we have built those things not over this period of years, and those core value propositions is what defines Aptech.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And Doctor, also one aspect I would like to, touch upon, because you've been known for over 3 decades now for helping people skill up and get ready for future jobs. And I have seen that how you forecasted the industry requirement and started building capabilities much in advance, and so on and so forth. But also another aspect which is now coming is this micro entrepreneurship. So a lot of students, I would say, in your campuses or in your centers also would have aspiration to become maybe their own entrepreneur or their own startup. So have you thought about creating some programs which can also shift up, and especially in current times where they can not only qualify as just from as skill themselves out, and then they can also start their own startup in some category, or some kind of micro entrepreneurship comes from Aptech programs?
Absolutely, Gaurav. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The gig economy, as it were, is here to stay. As we go forward, there are certain basic changes going to happen. Okay. One is, of course, jobs will remain as they are, but the color of those jobs may change. But quite apart from job, there will be the number of people who are micro entrepreneurship is what you mentioned, who are going to become freelancers, are going to be able to communicate their own value proposition to other people while working independently, maybe in teams of 1s or 2s, or maybe 5s at best, is going to multiply. And the essence of training for that kind of a scenario is what? Is to be able to communicate and differentiate Not just imagine a person that who wants to be a freelancer or a entrepreneur, and he says, "I'm going to manage. I'm let's say choosing something out of the head, say graphic artist, for example. Okay, I have two options. One friend joins a job, another friend goes and becomes a freelancer, and he sources opportunities on the web and he delivers it. Now, these two people are going to become in very different environments. Therefore, the skill sets they will require are going to be very different, right? Therefore, to be able to equip, we have some micro programs which we deliver to be able to train people for the gig economy. But more important than that is when you're talking about communication of your ideas, firstly, you should have communication skills. You know, unfortunately, the entire education system of this country, if you go to an employer and say, what is the basic thing which people lack? They say it is the personality and communication.
Absolutely.
It's a weakness of the whole education industry, where the universities, colleges, us, everybody put together. So if you have to communicate your ideas, you have to develop those abilities. So the idea is that your training provider's responsibility is to be able to point that to you and help you build towards that. Let's say you have to build in areas of little bit of finance, little bit of salesmanship, little bit of various things. So you have to be able to package that into your programs, and which we do through what we have a terminology called the 6 advantage to be able to do that. But keeping the micro things aside, there is essence. It's become the essence of our programs going forward. We are training people not only for one type of a job. The word job is today encompassing various kinds of value aspirations or customer aspirations, which are going to become the reality and which already become reality today. It's not that we are talking very much into the future. We are talking current and the immediate future, which is there. So yes, these are changes which are going to happen. I mean, even forget students for a minute. Even if you take the employers or employees working in companies, you have concepts like they are doing something on the side which used to be frowned upon, you know, but dual working is coming in.
Absolutely.
People are doing things on the side, and this takes me to a whole new dimension, which is, you know, you ought to do something which you are passionate about. I do this honestly because I'm passionate about it. And likewise, the student who joins my courses really comes in and should only come in if he's passionate about what he is doing, because that works better in the long run. Now, when you are talking about delivering on your passion, it sounds very good, but you have to make money while doing it. You have to earn your you have to pay your bills to be able to do it. So how to turn your passion into a business or a livelihood is a process of developing certain skills which we are trying to build towards. The issue of differentiation, you know, it's okay. You know, we talk about MOOCs a lot. You know, that's one of those, you know, you're right from the government to everybody thinks that just putting web conferencing tools and some LMS systems solves the education problems in the post-COVID world. I'm sorry, it does not. I differ. Because if 20,000 people are doing that one same course, the idea which those 20,000 people have to grapple with, how do I stand out? If there are going to be 200 jobs or 200 opportunities for those 20,000 people, how does that person build his differentiator? And that comes through a very complicated and very intense process, which happens in a collaborative mechanisms to be able to build in. It's not that it's impossible to do a technology. I don't say it's impossible, but they are suboptimal. And as there are a lot of great minds out there who are putting their heads, it's not that I have this great epiphany on this. I think there are a lot of great minds who have already working on this and looking at how to do this, how to work this aspect. I think elements of technology are bound to come in delivery more than what they are currently, because we have got over a little bit of a hump, as it were, in the entry barrier. there were a lot of people who were hesitant to learn online. And if they, now that they've got a sample of it, they may think it's okay to do it. So if they like the sample, they may continue doing a bit of it, which is fine. So those fence sitters and those naysayers may cross into the pure online world also.
Absolutely. Ashtap, because we're running out of time.
Yes,
so,
I was about to.
So if you have last questions for Doctor, I think some of the last few points, because we have a lot of questions coming from audience also. If you want to take some 1 or 2 quick questions.
Yes, actually, Dr. Kacker just answered many of them, because you know that with technology, the learning will happen in a suboptimal way. So I think they've been answered. But
I have one particular thing which I would like, so to say, ask you, Doctor. So because you're so experienced, and if I will do injustice to the audience if we don't take maybe 2 or 3 important best practices what franchise companies should do, because I always see that very few examples, and you can just handpick 1 or 2 companies or companies who have survived franchising, seen different cycles, change cycles, manage networks, handle businesses like yours, where the industries have evolved. What we used to teach in the early 90s is different to what you're teaching now, and the student behavior. So what are the 2 or 3 best practices you would like to leave us with, where any franchise company or anybody who's young CEO starting franchise company should learn from you?
See, I think firstly is to communicate. You have to be transparent and you have to go on communicating, especially in crisis situations such as the one we are going through currently. It is important that there is an open forum where you are able to communicate and listen. Both, it's a two-way communication, because that communication builds trust. The objective is to build trust. Because remember, there will be differences of opinion between you and the franchisees many a times. While it's all good to say that we are on the same side and serving the customer, but then there are areas where there are differences of opinion. There are differences in capabilities. There are differences of outlook. And you have to be able to tide over those situations and either be convinced or convince. And that will happen only if there is trust. So I think the importance of building trust cannot be overemphasized in a particular relationship. Secondly, is build a peer-to-peer relationship, which is you respect each other for the deliveries, for those respective roles. Do not try and play each other's roles for them. No point sending Harbhajan over, Singh open to bat if you have a Sachin. Get a Sachin in. Okay, if Sachin is injured, nobody else is left, send Harbhajan in. Okay, fine, that's crisis. You handle firefighting. But there's no point. You hire Sachin as for an opener. If you're a bowler, you become a Harbhajan. It's fine. That's how teams are made. Don't try and do each other's job better than the other guy, just because you can. So there has to be mutual healthy acceptance of the respective roles. Sure, give suggestions to be able to improve the system, but do not overtake that role for yourself. And that is a temptation which many franchisors have. If in a vast network, there will always be people who will perform better, who will perform worse. Your job as a franchisor is to help the guy perform better, but not take over the center and say, okay, you get out, I'll get another guy to do it better than you can. So that's a problem. Likewise, from a franchisee's perspective, that your job is not to do a product or a segment or a strategy and implement, or you do your own version of your marketing exercise, which you think is very hyper local, very suitable for you. Maybe it is, but stay away from that. Just because you can, don't do it. So that takes greater willpower and a little bit of tempering of your ego also at times.
Very well said, sir. Very well.
Sure.
Ashtap, final word from you. Anything you want to ask, Doctor? This is your opportunity.
Yes, one thing I wanted to let all our viewers know as well, that there are questions pouring in, but we would not be able to answer them. But I would request Dr. Kacker, I will send you a few questions out of these, and would send the viewers their answers. So it's for all of you guys. We'll answer you back onto every question of yours. And one on a lighter note, Dr. Kacker, I come to understand that you love eating street food. So how are you coping up these days?
Oh, it's terrible. I love chaat. I mean, more than anything else, yeah, it's one of those things. But I kind of, I'm not a great cook, but I've been spending more time in the kitchen, as you can imagine, than I have ever in the past. And I'm enjoying the process of what I'm dishing up for myself. My son is a great cook, so it's fine. So I never usually.
Okay, great. So I understand that they're outside as well. So you've got a lot of time for yourself nowadays.
Oh yes, I don't know about a lot of time, but certainly working from home has been a learning of its own nature, where the value you attach to time management becomes much better. So you have to do your duties at home, which you were kind of slipping away from earlier. And no, it has to be done. You have to be able to get into a routine. So, and likewise for the team itself, we worked a full charter of how how the day flows. So I think we are actually working much, much more. And that's a refrain I've heard from many, many people, that they're working much more from home than they ever did working from home, for maybe half the productivity, but that's okay.
Right, true. No, thank you so much, Dr. Kacker, for your time. I think we've got, a lot many golden principles in franchising industry. I mean, I still feel after 20 years that I'm still learning after talking to you today. That was wonderful having you here, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, GM, for your time as well. I understand that you've got another webinar to go to. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Ashita. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you here.